welcome everyone to episode, I think it's 3, Tim, or 4. Which one?
Yeah,
is
this is our second episode.
No, this is
the first one went okay. Maybe we'll do better this time.
Yeah, of the Wednesday night live show. Guest tonight is Dr. Colin Mendelsohn.
Mendelsohn,
and also with us tonight as a guest. I'm going to butcher his last name, but I'm going to try. Phillip Kirschberg.
Kirschberg, John, I swear. But you know what you did? That was a stain on my people's history. But mostly, I think you called me Phillip instead of Phil, and that's progress.
I said Phillip.
Yeah. You said Phillip.
Yeah, tonight was a
on
tricky
that. I
night
say
for
to you,
John.
Mazel tov.
Mazel tov. Phillip. No. That's like I said. That's my brother's name, so I'm not going to forget that. So you're Phillip too as well. So
I
may even call you Filippo.
Well, you can call me Kirsch if you're nasty. That's fine. It's Kirschberg.
Kirschberg.
Cherryberg Mountain, I believe.
Got it. Kirschberg. I will remember that.
Is that what it means? Kirsch is cherry.
Kirsch is cherry, and Berg, Berg, I believe, is hill or mountain.
Correct. Okay. Or ice.
Doctor, please correct me if I am telling tales out of school.
Is he lying to us, Colin?
No.
Okay.
I don't know. Hold on. The lie detector meter I'm running.
Somebody get Google on there. Get Google
being
on
deceptive.
I tried lying.
Everybody knows.
I tried lying through junior high. I couldn't even get through junior high without just completely destroying it. So yeah, basically I have to tell the truth, and it's not always easy.
Hey, I grew up as a Catholic boy and an altar boy. It's hard to lie. I know the feeling. So don't worry about it. As everyone knows, I butcher everybody's last name. It's just the way things are. That's how it goes. So I apologize to anybody out there if I butcher your last name. That's just me. So we're going to start the show a little bit different. Usually we talk about how our week is going, but I figure, you know what? Let's bring it back. Well, Tim, what was your flavor of choice today? What did you grab to start vaping today?
You know, today was one of those days where I'm like, you know what? It's time for a coil change. It's time for a wick change. I'm like, I think that means juice change. Let's just go for the trifecta. So today I landed on shocker, Monster Labs, Ice Monster, Straw Melon Apple.
Of course he did.
I'm seeing a pattern here, Tim. You know that, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I think they call that predictable, Phillip.
I think he owns stock in that company or something.
I use the same juice almost exclusively. So any change, even within that brand, is a huge thing for me. People are like, "What?" But I've done so. Next, Paul, what are you vaping, or do we want to know?
This one's actually a sweet tangerine lemonade that I created. Something a little bit different.
Nice. Is it one of your works?
Or is it is.
Yeah, he said he made it.
Oh, he made
it. This is going to be released actually by the end of this month throughout Europe. It's part of a lemonade line that I've just completed.
Yeah.
So never had a tangerine lemonade before.
Tangerine. God, that sounds good though.
Yeah. I like tangerines. Yeah. Like a lot of people use.
If you would have said mango, me and Tim would have been more interested.
Mango lemonade?
No, I've done that. I've done that in the past. And it works to a point, but with a lot of the mangoes, you get that funky note. And that's what I'm not interested in anymore. No, this one's just very light because it's quite hot here today.
It's refreshing.
It's refreshing. Yeah, that's it. Dr. Colin, are you vaping a flavor today?
Look, I'm very much an outcast. It appears I'm not a vapor, and I've never smoked. So I must admit,
you are a lucky man.
You are not an outlier, sir. You are inspiration. Trust me on that one.
Well,
I often say to myself when things in the United States, in terms of the anti-tobacco harm reduction rhetoric, becomes really, really bad and truly hard to believe, I say to myself, well, we could be in Australia. And I say that with the utmost respect because before, I believe it was Carl Phillips told me many years ago about the nature of, I think it's a Mr. Sophia Childersberg. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Simon. He told me about the nature of his character, and he said he was really, truly, and deliberately nasty, malicious. And I didn't believe him until about a month later, right before he blocked me, and I suddenly and that's when I saw all the evidence to show that he was indeed not only wrong, but just horribly personally nasty. And so I have a tremendous respect for all that you have done and all that you have endured to do it. And thank you.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah, look, we cop a lot of flack in Australia. The debates become very personal, and the problem for the anti-vaping crowd is they don't have any arguments left. The evidence is not in their favour.
Yeah.
So the only thing they can do is try and smear us and undermine us and try and discredit us, and they do that all the time. And look, to be honest, it just makes me more determined.
Yeah, we'll get into that. Phillip, what is your flavor of choice today?
This is a new little.
What did you wake up and say? I gotta have this today. What was it?
The nearest, whatever was on my nightstand. What did I have to have today? What I had to have today was something new. I tried a new disposable for the benefit of everyone who is using disposables. It's important to me that we kind of narrow them down into the few that are worthy of your dollars, as opposed to the many that are just dreck, which is Yiddish for crap. Michael says he's vaping strawberry. Good. Right on. A good strawberry is hard to find.
Yep.
It is. But I've been trying several disposables, and well, let's just say the Elf Peach Ice, it does not disappoint.
Peach Ice. Yeah, Peach
Thank
Ice.
you for taking one for the team, Phillip.
I appreciate that.
I gotta look. I have to get my little magnifying glass out. Prism. I think it's Prism Pure.
You know it's bad when you don't know why you're being made fun of. You just know you're being made fun of.
Well, no, I'll be honest. I may be the only oddball on the panel, other than the doctor. I've never vaped a disposable. Like I've never, like all of you guys have like all the 5,000, 6,000 puffer. I've never had one. Never tried one. I don't get them sent to me for free or anything like that. So.
I only buy them like when I go hiking. That's the only time I buy them, because I just don't want to take one of my mods with me and lose it, or have it fall down a friggin' side of a mountain. So I always just grab a few.
I don't want to be a liar entirely. I think at one time somebody sent me like a Stig type one, that was garbage, and it was like 2+, and I threw it in the trash. But I've never.
That person's not a friend to you.
No, I think it was just like, hey, this is in a box. Yeah. I'll send it to Tim, kind of thing. I mean, I think he meant well.
I'll send it to Tim. Tim will like it.
I think, send it to Tim. He won't like it. He hates
from the Life commercials.
Yeah, but I've never had any of the ones that you guys talk about, the Elf bars, the Puff bars, the Bellows. Yeah. I've never tried any of them.
Hey, Timmy.
I'm trying to discern what is actually a quality product as opposed to the millions out there that are, riding on our government non-regulations. So I think it's just research on my part. Do I like some of them? I do. Are they convenient? Yes, they are. Do I think that we need to weed out the good from the god awful? Well, I'm working on it. I am.
And how do you guys feel about the whole environmental impact and the issue around these disposables?
I think it's crazy. I think we've talked about it before on the show, but I wish that vape shops, even convenience stores that sell them, have some sort of recycle bin where they have an opportunity to bring that product back into that bin. And come on, these companies are making fistfuls of money. Offer, hey, you bring back this rechargeable battery, we'll give you 15% off on your next purchase.
Yeah, I
guarantee you people will do it.
I would have thought the consumers would support the idea of recycling when everyone's concerned about the planet.
Yeah.
And all those colourful devices, thrown away in the streets. It's a very bad PR thing for vaping.
Oh, it's terrible, and I also think it's well, I think it's a lesser evil than what cigarette butts do. But I
Yeah,
also think what we have in the meantime is we're in a holding pattern where people hardly know where they can vape and where they can vape legally, let alone where they can recycle a vape. And I think it's a horrible reality that without regulation, without proper guidelines, when they're being sold, in places counterfeits, I think that recycling is absolutely necessary. But I also think there are those big hurdles that we're trying to overcome until before that's something that we can really do and do it well.
So there's no organized recycling programs. It's just sort of hit and miss in the US.
Yeah.
I think
I
I think it'd be successful. I really do think, especially if you throw in a discount. If you throw in a discount, I think the guy's more likely to come in and
trade in. Yeah.
say, hey, I'm going to get 10%. Go ahead, Tim.
I was going to say,
my friends give 20% off for every pack of cigarettes you bring, at least.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, if you think about it, it's another indirect way to kind of show good faith, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, we're already under a lot of duress and scrutiny, and then these articles come out stating that, these things could be a massive impact to the environment, just, people throwing them in the sand, the dirt, the side of the road, whatever. If people who vaped, who enjoy disposables, not taking away whatever works for you, if people were to just pitch in and be proactive at that and recycling in general, maybe even somebody starting their own recycling program ad hoc, I think on the circumference it would look like, hey, they give a crap about the planet. They're not throwing them in the street. They're actually taking the incentive to recycle.
Positive, something positive. Before we get
as
going,
one of the comments said there from Baker B, who's from Australia, you can dispose of them individually, but I think we need a more organized program. And I really think the retailers need to take responsibility and have recycling bins. And that's something we're looking at in Australia to improve the reputation of vaping, because we need everything going.
I can think of upsides for everyone, whether it be retailer, user, everyone seems to benefit from this.
It'd be just Puff Bar alone. Just think about how many of those are sold a day.
None to this guy.
I can't fathom it. At the same time, though, being here and being out and about and walking around, I don't see too many people with them, and I have not seen any cast-offs in the street and stuff like that.
What I do see using that product is people my kids' age, that between that 25 and 30. That's where everyone that I have seen that has been using that product has been within that age group right there, between 25 and 30 years old.
Right.
And I have not seen talking about Puff Bar.
Yeah, Puff Bars, a disposable, those little disposable. I haven't seen too many.
Puff Bars have been something I've not seen in a long, at least since they did that ridiculous special. I've not seen those.
Or Elf Bar. I'm sorry, Elf Bar. Elf Bar. Yeah. The square one. Because that's the one that both my daughter and my son have one. Every time I run into somebody when I'm out and about or drinking, we go out drinking, and I go out front to have a vape. It's always one of those little square, colorful Elf bars that they're using. So,
and they all end up in the landfill.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Poisoning the environment. So that is a big problem.
Yep.
Yeah, before we get started, Tim's going to say hello to everybody in the chat real quick.
Yeah, we got a fast scroller. So hey everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of the Wednesday Night Live Show. And let's start from the top on down, because we got all these lovely faces in the group listening and chiming in. We got Pam. Actually, Pam beat Mallory. I don't see Mallory just yet. Something tells me she's down there somewhere. I'm starting from the top, but I'm like, it's always Mallory first. Now we got a race. So Pam beat Mallory to the punch. Tom, good to see you, Tom Morwitz, not the other Tom. Not the Tom trapped in the basement. Good to see you, Tom. How are you, sir? Hold on. Michael Redfern, good to see you, sir. How are you? A Bastard in the chat. He had a great question, and I'd like to address that real quick when I'm done with all the pleasantries.
Yeah.
Addie Tooney. Good to see Addie Tooney.
Addie.
How are you, Addie? Good to see you. Hold on, I'm
God bless
scrolling.
you, sir.
Carpal tunnel is on the way. Hold on one second. Baker B in the house. Already got the call out from the doc. Mowgli, or yeah, I got it right, Mowgli. I sometimes I trip up on my L's and I's. They look exactly the same. Mowgli Vapes, good to see you, sir. How are you? And I think I'm. Oh, there's Mallory.
Yeah,
Mallory's
she's in
down
there.
there.
She's in
Yeah,
there.
Hey,
Mallory.
Mallory.
Mallory's down there. So yes, thank you for showing up, Mallory. Always great to see you. And real quick, I think Abe Bastard. I think we do have to equate some of the early Cigalikes as disposables because they
Yeah.
were self-contained carts, and you did one of them.
We didn't know any better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was
That was his
first
question. Yeah, I was looking at that. Yeah, you could have to consider those.
Yep.
The availability of liquid was somewhat limited in the state of Alabama, which is where I am. By the way, Colin, what time is it in Australia where
It's
you are?
about 1:15 in the afternoon. on
They're
Thursday.
lunchtime.
Yeah.
Lunchtime out there. Hey, Paul, you promised us you would be eating a kangaroo sandwich today, and you're not.
I thought he would be in jail for crying out loud.
Oh wow!
Kidding.
What? So, what have I
Actually,
done
I'm
this week? What have I done this week? You know,
No, you
I
said
don't- I
you
haven't-
said
I
you
haven't-
said
It's what you
promised
said you were
us.
going to do last week. That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, you
well,
promised
I
us you would
haven't
be
I haven't gotten into any trouble. I didn't have time today because I've been running around all morning, and the phone wouldn't stop ringing today for some reason. And I thought, oh, okay, I can't cook anything.
Yeah.
So once I finish the show, I've then got to go to another appointment this afternoon. I'm having 1 beer, 2 beers, and I had a snack this morning, but
Good boy.
no.
Good for you. Good for you.
But I'll be right back. I just
Seltzer.
need to deal with something here. All right. One
I'm
sec.
going to start off the questions real quick for Colin. Scientific studies have always been a controversial. Where'd he go? he was being serious. I thought he was joking around.
Yeah, no, he'll be back. Don't worry.
Scientific studies has always been a controversial topic, no matter what field, whether it's archaeology or the Bible. So anytime a study comes up that contradicts the narrative that has been set in stone, how does one go about educating that field? And let's be honest, that needs to happen before the general public takes any interest in our industry. You get what I'm trying to say there?
No.
No, not really. No.
One more reiteration might help.
Yeah. Well, one of the battles that we have is the constant narrative that the ants have set it in stone for everyone to understand and believe. And with the tobacco industry's past history and being untruthful and stuff like that, do you find it a little bit more difficult to try to change the scientific community's ideas of vaping? And how that's important before the general public will understand or accept what we're doing.
Yeah, look, the difficulty we have is that when people have made up their minds, it's very hard to change that. People lock in and they defend the narrative for whatever reasons. And I think it's no longer about the evidence. I mean, the evidence is very clear now. I mean, it's not that we don't have all the answers, but we know more than enough to know that vaping is far more effective than other treatments. It's much safer than smoking. There's no problem with a gateway. Long-term risks are likely to be very small and far less than smoking. I mean, all that's straightforward. And you can present evidence till the cows come home. But if someone's committed to a narrative that's anti-vaping, it's going to go in one ear and out the other. And then we all know it's a big tobacco conspiracy as well. And as soon as you start trying to defend it, of course, you're vilified as not thinking of the children and supporting the tobacco industry. And, logic doesn't really, and the evidence just doesn't seem to come into it. And the problem we have in Australia, and I suspect in the US, is that the media, the mainstream media, is quite negative, and they've been kind of
unbelievable.
Yeah, they've kind of been won over by the main anti-vaping organizations, and they keep spreading that narrative, and you get these ridiculous scientific studies coming out which are presented in an alarmist, negative, unbalanced way. And it's very hard to win the hearts and minds of the people who aren't really informed, because that's what they read. And if you read something often enough, and it comes from organizations that are normally respected, it's very hard to break through that.
Yeah, the reason I bring that question up is because it's like I watch a lot of documentaries, and a lot of times that seems to be the biggest issue with trying to change the scientific world about how things have been different. It could have been different. This is not the way it happened. It's hard to kind of change that narrative with certain scientists and people that are in that field. And I just feel like we're kind of in that same boat, but I almost feel like it's not just, oh, you support tobacco and blah, 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 but also the fact that there's a lot of money backing those scientists up to say what they have to say to keep that narrative going. And it just...
Has anyone ever taken into consideration how it was the Royal College of Physicians in the United Kingdom that first blew the whistle on the big tobacco companies for covering up a certain amount of the dangers of combustible tobacco? And wow, how ironically they were the first ones to say vaping is an absolute public health milestone. I constantly think of that. Sorry to interrupt, but it is the same source that was so critical of the tobacco companies is saying this is a way out, and we support it.
Yeah,
I think that's something that we overlook a little bit.
Look, we do have trouble adapting to new technologies, and people tend to stick with things they know. And there's no question that vaping will be recognised eventually. The trouble is a lot of damage will be done in the meanwhile, to businesses and to current smokers. But I'm quite confident, like all new harm reduction interventions and new technologies, they're always fiercely resisted early on. But then it gets to a point where you just can't ignore the evidence anymore. Yeah. And that will happen with vaping. It's just a question of when.
I think it is actually happening, maybe for reasons that we weren't prepared to accept, or would prefer not to accept. But in Canada, for example, they've just made a very big change in their messaging on vaping and the causes of the valley. They've actually changed the name, taken the E out, and it's Valley. And that one letter could mean so much for thousands of Canadians who smoke. And I'm very happy, optimistic about that, because they very plainly state that this had nothing to do with nicotine vaping. And that's something I wasn't expecting.
Well, yeah. And they came out to say that popcorn lungs. Sorry, Paul. Popcorn lung also.
It's fine.
And yet, so many reputable health organisations still, quote those as arguments against vaping, in spite of the evidence.
I mean, at least Valley happened. Popcorn lung it's not even.
Yeah. I know.
We're talking bad fiction here.
Yeah. But the number of times I get asked about popcorn lung, it's clearly out there in the consciousness of people. It's had an impact.
I had a phone call. I had a phone call just before the show. Is popcorn lung a real thing? I said, oh, here we go. We're going to address, and I sent them the link to the show. And I said, look, I think you better come and have a little listen, because you might learn something for a change. And this is an actual vape shop owner, a new vape shop owner here in Australia. And I went, wow. So you've got people coming to you, showing you little stories on their phones or tablets, whatever they take with them. And I said, listen, it's been completely debunked. Diacetyl has been removed from 99% of the concentrates used in the manufacturing of our liquids. That's for a start. Second, it would take probably 25 years of exposure of whatever diacetyl is left to even make a 1% dent in your lung health. I said, there's diacetyl in a cigarette, but the diacetyl in a cigarette is 250 to 500 times greater than even the highest. Is
there someone here who can tell the source, the original, where popcorn lung was termed? It was in a popcorn factory.
Yeah, correct.
Just for our viewers.
It was the diacetyl.
Dr. Mendelsohn, would you like to?
Yeah,
It was
shut
the
up.
diacetyl use.
I'll answer the medical questions. Yeah, no,
Yep.
it all started. It all started
Goddamn right you
back
will.
in a microwave popcorn factory where workers were exposed to high levels of diacetyl in the air, and a number of cases of popcorn lung were developed and reported. But as Paul says, the amount of diacetyl in vapes, even those which have it, which are very few, is tiny, hundreds of times less than what's in cigarette smoke. And there's never been a single case of popcorn lung from vaping or even from smoking.
Yeah.
So it's just a nonsense.
And that story is old. So that's am I right?
believe
That's like
it was a
1950.
Orville Redenbacher microwave
Yeah,
popcorn.
it's like 1950s, right?
No,
No, it was subsequent. I've got the study, but it was subsequent to that. I'll just quickly look it up. But yeah, talk amongst yourselves.
I thought that was a
My-
real old story.
It was
No.
people who worked in the factory and were exposed to just tons of this stuff constantly,
Yeah.
skin, air,
It's
over many years. It's just
but
not.
but diacetyl can be taken up two ways. It can, like skin exposure, yes. Breathing, inhalation, that's your second exposure. Third exposure is combustion of it. With the popcorn factories, diacetyl's used like in the food
It's
industry
a
commonly.
buttering flavor.
Well,
Oh
that's
shit!
it.
2000s. The physicians reported that 8 former microwave popcorn
Yep.
factory workers had developed a rare and this. Yeah. So yeah, no,
in May 2000.
I thought it was older than that. For some reason, I thought it was.
No.
1990, right?
It was reported in 2000. Yeah, in the first journal study.
Yeah.
Yeah, in one microwave popcorn factory. Yeah.
So for everyone listening, it would it's literally impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that diacetyl has been taken out of all flavorings, it may have very well been just an exercise in making sure people were comfortable, and it wasn't even really necessary. But it couldn't happen. We're more likely to wake up tomorrow on Venus.
Yeah, and it's never happened. It hasn't happened from smoking, which has far higher levels of diacetyl. So it's just a nonsense. Like so much.
So thankfully, we're all finished with that.
Go ahead, Tim.
So isn't that really the gist of it, though? I mean, when we talk about the anti-messaging that's put out there, and you think about the public in general and their consumption of information, and I'm not talking necessarily about the people in the vaping community, because we're wiser than that, because we're willing to go research the information that's said so that we can critically think about what is being disseminated across, like, oh, this popcorn, and then we go figure it out. We're like, does that really? Because if it affects me, I might have a personal concern. I'll avoid flavors that have diacetyl or those type. Okay, so my second point is, but isn't that really the gist of it, right? The public in general, who typically don't have any dog in the fight, meaning they're just there to gather an opinion about whether they think something is acceptable or unacceptable. The boogeyman is always the gotcha, right? So if somebody, even they throw out some mistruth, like popcorn lung, vaping is going to cause popcorn lung because we found diacetyl in a certain brands or a number of brands, and that has been tied to products that had diacetyl that caused this popcorn lung thing, and that's the thing they hang their hat on, like, oh shit, popcorn lung, and then they run around and they love to carry that boogeyman on their shoulder. So
it's a
they
good
don't
thing
want to
cigarettes cause heart disease and cancer. Otherwise, people would be, having to hang their hat on popcorn lung. And it's just, it's foolish. And the more we react to it, the less time we have to focus on the important things.
What's funny though, because you said that. What's funny though is when you ask someone about someone smoking, the first thing that I usually get out of the other person that's not a smoker's mouth is, "Oh, it's his choice if he wants to die." But we don't get that same, you know what I'm going with it, because like when you say you're vaping, it's like a whole different conversation. But when that person says, "Oh, he's smoking," and he knows the risk, if he's an adult, let him make his choice. But when it's with us, it's with vaping, it's a whole fucking different conversation. It's like, oh my God, you're gonna die. Oh my God, this is gonna happen. Oh my God.
Right. and that leads me to the close on that, and in that you didn't really ever hear anything about popcorn lung other than maybe some anecdotal post about some people in a popcorn factory.
Yeah.
But when you talk about addressing smoking in general, in 30 years, 20 something years of being a cigarette smoker, never heard one person even utter the words popcorn lung when it comes to a cigarette, not even realizing that diacetyl was in those products as well.
I don't think anybody knew what diacetyl was until 2002.
Yeah, somewhere around after 2013, after everyone was congratulating me for so long for finally quitting smoking in it was April of 2010, when vaping was still just we could find very few products and juices and that sort of thing. Somewhere around 2013, I guess, was the first time I'd ever heard anyone say popcorn lung. And many years ago, I did the research and thought to myself, this is, not even close to being something that should be considered a hazard of vaping nicotine. And
Right.
I don't know who was the first one to use it against vaping, but let's just say they did a very good job. But we're not going to, give them any more of our time.
Yep. Good idea. Yeah, I look up, but where that came from, in 2016, there was a study published in a scientific journal where they referred to the finding of diacetyl, and they made the link. And then, of course, the media went berserk, and it just became part of the narrative.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of companies, I think, was it Vapor Shark maybe in the United States, took, in 5 pounds, they took diacetyl out of their e-liquids. And I think that was the appropriate thing to do. But unfortunately, much like a lot of the good things the vapor industry does, they were just pointed out as, well, see, they knew all along. And it was just the lowest kind of attacks. And I'm hoping we're going to spend less time giving them an argument on those fronts, because we really need to decide which debates are worthy of our attention and which ones we really just need to pass on.
Yep.
That's my opinion.
Yep. Good idea.
So I have a question for the doctor.
Yeah, go ahead, doctor.
All right. So, and it tethers off of the question you asked, John. So I mean, you put yourself on the line to speak the truth all the time, doctor. So, I mean, you've chosen, despite all of the backlash, or or the someone trying to discredit you for speaking that. Have you found it sort of liberating to be a voice of truth in sort of an ocean of nonsense?
Yeah, look, I know I'm doing the right thing, Tim. I know that by getting the right message out, potentially that there is the potential to save millions of lives. And yes, I get criticized, and sometimes it's very mean. But the more it happens now, I really don't care. As long as I know I'm doing the right thing and saying the truth. I just get blown away by some of our key medical organisations. Our peak health organisation in Australia, the NHMRC, put out a statement last year about vaping. And even at that level, they've argued against vaping because of EVALI, because of popcorn lung, because of the gateway. We don't know the long-term risks. I mean, stuff that the evidence clearly contradicts. And look, someone has to point it out, because everyone says, oh, well, the NHMRC says that, and the Australian Medical Association and the Cancer Council.
Yeah.
And look, I think, someone has to counter that. And what I'm trying to do more and more is counter it in 2 ways. One, in academic articles, and I've written quite a lot of them now on things like that. And also the other avenue is to try and persuade the politicians to see things more accurately, because I think at the end of the day, the decisions are political.
Right.
And if we can get the message through to them, I think that's key.
Do you find that your message at all has permeated deeper into the medical environment? Like, do you see some doctors starting to maybe change their tune, or even be willing to accepted?
Look, only a handful in Australia. And the problem with that is that we have a prescription-only model. So you can legally only use nicotine if you have a script. But less than 1% of doctors are actually willing to write a script.
Yeah.
And the research shows that doctors just get their information from the media, and they're mostly very misinformed. I mean, you know about the study in the US, doctors' attitudes to nicotine. They think it causes cancer and all of those things. The doctors, unfortunately, are very misinformed, and they're listening to the AMA and the government and the bodies that normally give them responsible information. And I'm sort of just there's a few of us who are speaking out, but we have a lot of opposition.
Yeah. Do you think that I forget what they're called, but they usually come in to the doctor's office and they're selling for a pharmaceutical company? What are those guys called, guys?
Pharmaceutical reps.
The pharmaceutical reps. You feel that they're also pushing that narrative?
Well, we know that the pharmaceutical companies are opposed to vaping, and I'm sure that's partly self-interest. And certainly they put in submissions to all the inquiries against vaping. I don't think the reps themselves talk to doctors about it because it wouldn't come up, but certainly their submissions and the publicity that they are responsible for is anti-vaping.
Well, you think, John, are you speaking in Australia or in general?
I'm speaking of Australia, because I'm kind of feeling like it is part of their job, because they want to keep continuing making sure these doctors don't fill out those prescriptions. And keep those doctors making sure that they're using their patch, their gums, their
exactly. I mean, their job is to sell their products, and we know that vaping is more effective, but they obviously see that as competition for sales. And also companies that treat COPD and heart disease, well, if vaping comes in, of course, there'll be a lot less need for their products, and we can't have that.
And burden on the healthcare system, well, it would just be alleviated, or not alleviated, but it would be lightened. I can't even imagine the benefit. But actually, in terms of what things might be said by pharmaceutical reps or techs or doctors, PAs, physician assistants in Australia, I don't mean to sound offensive, but there's really nothing that would shock me.
No.
There is nothing. And there was something, the most telling thing that I read recently about the situation in Australia was a very lengthy article that I read. It named you and Alex Waddock as being supporters of vaping. And I think that it was talking about Foundation for a Smoke-Free World and how, but the interesting thing is reading through this lengthy article, which I expected to be just a smear your name piece, just big tobacco, this and that. No one brought up the significance or the quality of the research, not once. And it was a long list of sanctimonious eyebrows raised in unwarranted suspicion about who sponsored it. And that to me is
I can tell you. Yeah, I mean, that was put to the media by Professor Mike Daub, who's one of Simon Chapman's friends, and they're rabid anti-vapors, and they have a legacy to protect. So their legacy is that they did a lot of good work in tobacco control over the years. There's no question about that. But vaping threatens their legacy and their relevance, because vaping will solve the problem that they couldn't solve. So they're totally opposed to it, and they come up with all these imaginary issues.
And I think that I've never seen such a lengthy indictment of nothing where they actually say this was funded by indirect money from a foundation that is actually, as far as I know, independent of the tobacco company that gave it money to fund reach. And they didn't once touch on the credibility of the research that was produced.
Exactly.
They did nothing. They did nothing but point out that it was funded in an indirect way by Phillip, and it's the longest I just don't know what. Essentially, they couldn't say anything about the research, which is, in my opinion, a pretty big. It says quite a bit about the state of anti-harm reduction, anti-tobacco harm reduction in Australia.
Yeah,
This
yeah.
is all they have left in their can.
That's all they have left, exactly. And you know, Alex and I were smeared because, listen to this, we wrote a peer-reviewed journal article criticizing a government report on vaping, which was shocking. And we made a clear summary of all the ridiculous statements that they made and gave the evidence for it. We quoted 54 references. One reference had been funded, it was by Ricardo Pelosa, who's a highly credible scientist. We referenced one of his papers, and we were attacked because we supported the foundation, and therefore we're big tobacco supporters, because we quoted one reference that had been funded by the foundation. They made no attempt to criticize our arguments. It was all about, well, you know, they're obviously big tobacco supporters. So that's what it's come down to.
It's over and over again, and I'm so grateful to you and Alex Waddick for keeping your heads about you when it comes to these things, because it's just I've gotten used to it, but it's just ridiculous in Australia. The things that the lengths they will go to actually prove that there's really nothing more that they can say. They've exhausted themselves, and they've resorted to the most ridiculous arguments. Yeah, and we're talking, at the end of the day, we're talking about something that could truly change lives for millions. And that's,
absolutely.
And I do think that perhaps the most impressive thing Australian Tobacco Control has ever done is ignore their de facto ban on nicotine, and they want to ban it harder now. And I think that's probably going to make for a higher quality black market than ever before.
The only way you'll get rid of a black market is to replace it with a legal, regulated one. And their plan is just to ban harder. And, you know, that's only going to make it worse. You know, it's just so obvious. But they're just not willing to admit that their chosen model is the way to go.
It's unbelievable.
Quick question, Doctor. Because this is something I've kind of talked about that I start to see happening around my area with people eventually starting to question what the hell is going on with vaping. And I'm talking just the general public itself are starting to take notice of this being in the news, being in the feed all the time, and wondering, especially if you're on Facebook, you can't help avoiding it. Do you feel that the Australian people are starting to say, hey, what the fuck? Why are we focusing so much of our attention on vaping?
Yeah, look, it's hard to avoid. There is a lot of media attention, and there are 1.2 million vapors in Australia out of 26 million people. So a lot of people know a vapor, and a lot of people are hearing very positive stories. So I think the biggest problem we have is engaging the vapors in effective advocacy. Unfortunately, a lot of them think, well, I've got my vapes, I'm okay, I can get supplies. And they're not speaking up. Now, you know, we've got an election coming up in our state in the next couple of months. There's about 5,000 vapors in each electorate. Now, if they all spoke up and wrote to their MP, we'd be game over. But getting them engaged, I find very frustrating.
Yeah, well, I'm not talking about the people in our community.
I think that's true.
To people
of all
the outside.
advocates.
I'm talking about the people outside of our community, the regular consumer, the regular person on the block, eventually kind of opening up their eyes and questioning what the hell is going on. Why is our government focusing so much on this? Why is this product being? Because that's what I'm starting to notice here in my area. People are starting to ask, even my aunt's like, "What the hell's going on?" You know,
well, it's because of the children, John.
Yeah,
we're creating a whole new generation of nicotine addicts and smokers, and we're undoing the decades of hard work in controlling tobacco. You know, that's the narrative, and that's constantly being repeated.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy that finally there are some individuals that are around me that are starting to take notice and wondering why our government is focusing with so much that's going on in the world, not alone here in our own country. Why are we so focused on this one little product? You know, and I think that's a good thing, because I think people will start to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to click on this vaping article. I'm going to go read this and see what's going on, instead of just saying, it's just the damn smokers and damn vapors. I don't give a shit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
For now.
For
I mean,
now.
the problem, of course, is that there is right through the community there are misperceptions about vaping based on all that constant storm of misinformation in the US and Australia, everywhere else. People have these misperceptions, and they probably think that they do think that vaping is a serious health concern.
Mhm.
And I think that's definitely interfering with the public perceptions overall.
Yeah.
I think there could be, well, there are two opportunities, if I may. First is, I think Greg said something to me recently that was extremely just keep it simple, stupid. We've been doing so much research for so long. We are talking at people, over people, every which way, but to people calmly and with a certain amount of, if we put ourselves in there, they don't smoke, they don't vape.
Yeah.
Stop, take a breath, and speak to them intelligently and give them the very slow and the most basic elements of what it is. And should they want to know more, I'm sure they'll ask. If they should have already decided and they just wanted to ask you to start an argument, don't give them one. I'm very guilty of just howling at everyone about every single reason why this is just monumentally important, and I don't think about how little they probably know about the subject in general. That's one. Number two, the greater harm reduction community, whether it be opiate harm reduction, just illegal illicit drug harm reduction, people with substance abuse issues in general, if we can just communicate and become a unified voice with so many other advocates that are, we're not really engaging with, that would be, I think, a huge benefit to both other
Yeah,
harm
I think
reduction advocates and.
Yeah, I think if we win harm reduction debates generally in other areas, it will benefit vaping harm reduction, tobacco harm reduction. But the problem is that for many people who've made up their minds, we're not going to change them. I think who we need to target is the people who are sitting on the fence. They're the ones who are perhaps open to making a decision. People who already decided, in my experience, the harder you try and convince them, the more they dig in. The whole thing backfires, and I think it's often counterproductive.
Yeah.
Sadly.
I find where sometimes I feel like I could make a difference outside of, just sharing my story with as many people as possible. As I've been able to connect with a few people that are kind of like on the perimeter of my orbit of friends and stuff like that. And sometimes just these side conversations pick up. And I talked about this a couple weeks ago. I was in a green room before my friend's band was going on, and a few of us were hanging out down in the green room, and this girl was down there at the time, and she happened to be a THC vapor. That's what she had in her hand. Now that's not what I was doing, but that's what she had. And we just started talking about vaping in general. And just because she saw me with my device, and, I guess that was a conversation piece or whatever. And even her as a vapor with THC, she had a lot of misconceptions about vaping, and we talked about popcorn lung, and we talked about all those things. And I feel like it's those, they don't even know that they're an ally at the time. They just and they're like, oh, well, I've got this. And so this is okay, which was the unfortunate side of the whole EVALI thing, right? When we were really looking at it and they started throwing out the term, vaping, not one person really kind of identified vaping with the black market cart thing. They all looked right at the flavored vaping crowd and was like, oh crap, that's the dangerous stuff. And that's the way the media
You
focused
mean
on
THC vapors didn't look
like across the board, the THC vapors, as well as the people who might have been aware of people who were vaping THC. It was like almost they had this inability to rather than conflate, separate the two and look at and go, okay, well, you're vaping, but you're not doing the THC. Well, but you're vaping and you're doing. They immediately went to the camp of, oh, it's the people that are doing the blueberry donut stuff that,
Mm.
you know, not the THC, the nicotine version of the blueberry donut.
Mhm.
They were the ones vaping the dangerous stuff, and they were convinced that the THC one wasn't as nearly as dangerous because the media kind of played to it as though it was the regular vapor. So I think she got caught up in that that wind of, oh, well, the whole entire time the thing I'm doing was not really the problem. It was what you're doing is the danger Will Robinson element. So to be able to have a conversation with someone who was THC vaping, who was clearly misinformed, thinking the thing I had was the more dangerous thing. She didn't
because
really.
It was blueberry donut flavor.
No. It had nothing to. I'm just pulling a flavor out of my hat in this case. I'm just saying.
Well, just flavored.
Yeah. My point is that when EVALI came around and the common conflated term of vaping was used to identify the source of where EVALI was coming from, the THC people who were vaping, as well as the general public who doesn't know squat about vaping, they never once gleaned and looked towards the THC side of it. Plenty of people seen people vape THC. They got the little pens at parties, and they don't do it, but they know, they see it. But instead, when they heard EVALI and, oh, people are dying and lung machines and all this craziness, their focus immediately went to the flavored nicotine vaping crowd. That's the dangerous stuff. And the media ran with that, unfortunately, for so long that even the THC vapors, who may have been legitimately buying it from a dispensary and not getting the black market THC card, had no clue that it was the stuff that was mixed in. And I'm not calling them bad, because I'm just saying it was the products within your realm that were really the cause and effect for the EVALI, the black market side of it. It wasn't the nicotine vapors. So when she came up to me with her little THC vape in hand, and we started talking about vaping, she's like, God, I had so many questions about that. I meant to ask you about stuff like that, because she's like, I heard about all the popcorn lung and all this other stuff. And I'm like, and I didn't vilify what she was doing. I didn't chastise her and go like, oh, no, it was your crowd that was the problem. I didn't take an argumentative stance. I said, no,
it was no crowd.
You were just misinformed. And that's really sort of the misnomer that was placed out there, that it was
and automatically she didn't find you attractive any longer.
Probably not.
It's always
that was the CDC. The CDC made the mistake of blaming nicotine EVALI and not pointing out that, in fact, the problem was those illicit cards.
Right.
And then, of course, the media runs with that, and it just went from there. So,
and the absurd thing is these things were mostly taking place in states in the United States where it's not federally legal, but certain states have legalized it. The cases are all coming from states where it is firmly and totally illegal and punishable by blah, blah, blah. That didn't tip anybody off to the possibility that, this is a state in which marijuana is so illegal that people might be hitting the streets for their dab. It's just, was your girlfriend, was she getting hers from a state where it is legal? I'm just curious.
Well, we're in Georgia. So really there is, I mean, I know that you can have a medical card here in Georgia, but we have no active dispensaries. So it's kind of like a coup d'etat, it's like, by virtue of a doctor, I can consume it because I need it for whatever condition they manufactured.
That's right. I forget you're in Atlanta. I'll see you at Springsteen this weekend.
Right. Awesome. But
they're going to give him oxygen to tour.
Who knows? Well, I just found it highly interesting that even the people who are kind of in the bubble of the verb vaping were even kind of misled on exactly, where the source of the issue came from. So, but my point to all of this, because I'm long-winded, is that it was, I admit it, but it was nice to have a conversation with her, because it's people like that who are sort of inside the alliance, and so to speak, can now take that information from me and go back to her other THC vaping friends and go, hey man, no, it's not that, you know what I mean? And then it permeates a different way, what I mean?
And this is at the time when it was still actively in the news and actively being
this is
this recently.
This is very recently.
Yeah.
That was the thing that struck me as the most disastrous thing. Well, second most disastrous thing. Not only were they mistaking nicotine vaping for something that was being caused by illegal THC carts that were just made and mixed with things that can't possibly be nicotine vaping products that have been around for God knows how many years. Nobody's getting sick. No one's getting sick outside of the United States. But they're not telling anyone to avoid at all costs uh, shady or illicit THC products. In the meantime, they're not warning the right people about the right product, and they're telling everybody tales about a product that has saved my life for sure, but they're maligning the product that is doing good and simply can't be the culprit here. And they failed to warn those people that were most at risk, and it was untenable.
They could have avoided a lot of deaths too if they would have jumped on that. Real quick, I want to read something for you, Doctor, that was written September 27th of 2022, and of all places, the Sydney EDU. Okay, I found this interesting, and I want you to tell me what has changed. It says, we found teenagers are rarely access it to using illegal flavored disposable vapes products that contain nicotine. Among the teens surveyed, 32% have never vaped at least a few puffs. Of those, more than 54% have never previously smoked. What's changed now that that's being the narrative now that all these teens are vaping now and smoking in Australia?
Look, we don't have good data in Australia. So what you need to look at, the critical group here is kids who've never smoked, who are vaping frequently. They're the ones with a public health that are of public health concern. So if you're a vapor, a non-smoker who vapes a few times, that doesn't matter. If you're a smoker who vapes, that's probably a good thing. We don't have data in Australia on never smokers who vape frequently. Now, I did a review of this recently, and I've submitted an article for publication. So in other countries, about 1% of kids who've never smoked vape frequently, depending on the definition of frequent in that state. So it's actually quite rare for kids who've never smoked to vape regularly. So in the US, it's about 1%. In the UK, it's half to 1%. It's a bit higher in New Zealand, where vaping is relatively newly legalized. So yes, kids are trying these things. The fact is that the vast majority of kids who try vaping are doing it experimentally, occasionally, and short term. And that's of little public health importance. And the kids who are smoking, most regular vaping is by kids who already smoke. And that's a good thing and we know that vaping is diverting a lot of kids away from smoking. There's a lot of good studies now, in different types of studies, which show that, as vaping rates are going up, smoking rates are falling. So we've got to take all that into account as well. And I think, honestly, overall, I think vaping's a good thing for teenage health.
I think there's some pretty credible data out there to show that most teens who vape and never smoke, by the time they are getting into their early and mid 20s, they have mostly given it up. And I have a stepson who graduated college recently. He's going to be going to med school. I said, Dr. Mendelsohn would not recommend that. And he's going to med school, and he vaped all throughout college. And I told him, look, if you're going to do something that you shouldn't do, I'm not going to tell you not to vape. I'm going to say that you do what you think is right. Know that it's habit forming, and not vaping. And vaping is much better than smoking. If I catch you smoking, I will probably want a serious word with you. You
cut his tuition. Cut his tuition.
Well, anyway, it's one of those things where I said, you're a smart kid. You understand the risks, which are compared to everything else you could be doing. I'm not going to lecture you. And by the time he was 6 months out of graduation, which is, he hasn't vaped in at least a couple of years now. It was, he was.
Yeah, and that's the way to speak to kids. That's the way to speak to kids, to give them honest information and make them aware of the risks so they can make an informed decision. And the more we try and tell them not to, of course, the more harmful that is. And I might just say something that Neil Benowitz said recently, which is that there's no evidence that vaping leads to regular smoking.
Right.
He told me he tried taking a puff when he was 16 and he almost choked to death. And he never so much as smoked a single cigarette, never once had an interest. Yes, he vaped a Juul for several years and he grew out of that. And
why would you progress? I mean, vaping is pleasurable. Smoking's disgusting and it's a lot more expensive. I mean, why would kids go on? You can get the nicotine you want and enjoy it at a much lower price. It just doesn't make sense that kids would progress.
Intuitively, and from a million different studies that show there is absolutely a gateway out of smoking and no gateway. Yes, it's one of the more ridiculous things that people tend to claim.
Paul, you're up, buddy. Take it off the mutie.
Paul, is that Paul?
That's Paul.
He's got to unmute.
Oh, there you go, Paul.
There we go.
There you go.
I think you're having technical issues.
Stupid things playing games.
There you go.
You make a good point, Paul.
I've got squirrels. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Did he just say he has squirrels?
Yes.
Whatever that means.
Go ahead,
we don't
Paul.
have squirrels in Australia, so I don't know what the hell he's talking about. But anyway.
Oh, our internet. It's run by squirrels. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Not kangaroos or koalas?
No, 100%. It's squirrels.
It's squirrels.
Moving forward, one of my questions is now that the TGA has shut down, the next period of commenting for how they want to move forward, do you think that they're just going to put the clamps on even harder to such a point where they'll even try and remove hardware from the industry or just create such a very slender type situation where we can only get a few certain products? And
look, I think the TGA consultation. I think the TGA consultation made it very clear what their priorities were. So they want the prescription model, because the TGA is a medicines regulator and they regulate medicines. So it's not for them to say, oh, well, this is actually a consumer product. It's kind of when you've got a hammer, everything's a nail. So they want to keep regulating this as a prescription. They were the ones that established this. It's created a complete mess and they've acknowledged that. And now, instead of saying, well, actually, we got that wrong, we have to try something different, they're now saying, well, oh, it's wrong because it was a good model, but the vapors aren't using it properly. We've got to double down and make sure it's used the way we intended. So we have to get stricter and stricter. And I think that's their intention. I think the consultation process was a box-ticking exercise, and government inquiries that we've had in the past have found that, basically they come to their predetermined conclusion no matter what we tell them.
Can you let everybody who doesn't know, I don't know who's going to be watching this show later, but is the TGA kind of like our FDA?
Yeah, okay. It's the FDA, yeah. And they only regulate medicines. And of course, vapes aren't medicines. Vapes are enjoyable consumer products that replace an existing deadly consumer product. It's not a medicine for sick people. And yet that's the way it's framed in Australia. And that means you need a prescription, which doctors won't give you. Pharmacists don't dispense them. And consumers have rejected this prescription model. And they think that by regulating it harder, suddenly everyone's going to step up and comply. And it's just not going to happen.
Everyone I know who has a prescription for nicotine vaping or for nicotine in Australia got it from you. I don't know I simply don't know of another doctor who has been as enlightened or as willing to take the risks that really do matter and not only advocate, but make sure people know where they can get these products, because you realize that on every level, it is that much healthier, and the advantages, the health benefits over cigarette smoking, where Australia hasn't exactly seen a massive decline like the rest of the world. they are seeing snail's pace because everybody and
Yeah.
everything is being, I don't even know how it's possible that people can be happy with the tobacco control establishment and the results, or rather lack of results, they're showing over these last few years.
Yeah. Well,
And
I did a graph. I don't know if you saw it on social media, but it showed about 7
I
countries. Yeah, and it showed the fall in smoking rates over the last 10 years, and the fall in Australia was 1.7% per year. In the other countries that were using tobacco harm reduction, it was about range between 5 and 7% per year. In New Zealand, when they introduced vaping in 2020, legalized it, adult smoking rates fell by 33% in 2 years. In Australia, they fell by 3%. Now, there's got to be a message there somewhere that we're clearly doing this wrong. Sure, there are other factors that bring down smoking rates, but tobacco harm reduction is having a huge effect.
And all the while, and I'll ask you in a second, I think that the very fact that they're going to obviously, or at least from what I gather, they're looking to repeat the same mistake that Greg Hunt's reign of terror did. Only they want to repeat it and add some new ones. And it's just, is it really that hard for them to admit that they made a mistake?
Yes,
because
they've admitted it isn't working. They've admitted it isn't working, but the only way to make it work is to double down and to restrict flavors, restrict nicotine, use plain packaging, ban the personal importation scheme, ban disposables. That's how they.
Otherwise, they lose face altogether.
Yeah, they look at the black market and say, "Well, this black market's terrible. We've got to get these out of the hands of kids. This is how we're going to do it." But of course, they've created the black market, and they're only going to make it worse.
And they must know it.
Yeah, they're going to get a much more inferior product out there that can do a lot of harm.
Well, I guess here's a question that I would love to ask you. You have the likes of Dr. Sandro, who is extremely, it's like a soap opera with that guy. He's young and foolish and very loose and alarmist about everything he has to say with regards to vaping. It's almost a little bit comical.
To be honest, Dr. Sandro is the head of the State Cancer Council Quitline group in Victoria, and they're very committed to the traditional quit smoking model, and so he's just spouting all the hysterical, alarmist nonsense, which is not evidence based, which clearly is going to do more harm than good. But he gets a lot of publicity because of his position.
I only became aware of him in the last 6 or 7 months, it seems, and it's almost as if it's almost as if Becky or Simon or one of those just gave him like a bullet point sheet, and he's just run with it. And it's I have to say, sometimes if it were not so, I have to laugh, otherwise I'll cry. It's just the messaging is not only inaccurate, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, it's all the mainstream narrative. He's got a public presence, and he's using that through his organisation to just disseminate all the fear and misinformation, and doing a lot of damage.
Well, quick question. As far as the prescription model there in Australia, that does not include lozenges, gums, patches. No. Those are just you can walk into any store and get yourself a box of patches.
Oh yeah, that's safe nicotine. You can get that. You can get that from the age. You can get that from the age of 12. But the nicotine they use in vaping is very dangerous. Very dangerous.
Paul, do you have beer?
It's a whole different breed.
It doesn't make any sense.
I took a picture at a local superstore recently of fruit, bold fruit, and some other kind of mint flavored gum, and I thought to myself, well, this is all very we have double standards just everywhere.
We do.
Now, what is the age that someone can walk into a store and buy a pack of patches?
12.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, it's legal from 12.
I don't think we have one here either.
Yeah, it's legal from 12. But with vaping, there's this huge nicotine epidemic we have to be very concerned about. That it's just ridiculous. And of course,
12 years old.
You can buy.
I don't think
flavored
there's an age restriction here either, John. I don't.
Are
It's
you
right
sure?
there. It was right there next to the COVID test, believe it or not.
Ours is locked up here. It's
Alabama's
behind,
a little
it's
bit
behind the
strange.
counter. It's behind the counter here. I've never seen it out on the floor at any store that I've ever
It
gone.
These
to.
are
says
the gum,
the
not
approved
patch.
labeling of it says the approved labeling of NRT products indicates that they should be sold to persons younger than 18 years. Should not be sold. Sorry, I missed the
Yeah, I was
the
gonna say,
interjection.
yeah, you got to be 18
Yeah.
at least here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's what it's
yeah.
saying. It's what the package is saying
Wow,
now.
I can just
Maybe the kids are hitting all the convenience stores to get their NRTs. Who knows? They're
well,
selling them
maybe
vapes and NRTs.
this way they can go get their patches and gums for their dads at the store. Like the old days where your dad used to send your son to the store to go buy cigarettes. Now you can send your kid to go get
Bobby, I need more of that Nicorette. Run on down to the corner
They're
store there
having
and
a
pick me
sale
up.
at Target. If you have a Target near you, they're on sale. Give them a try.
Wow.
They have
Yeah.
bold
Yeah.
citrus flavor.
Well, I think I mean, age aside, I think that's the one thing that I find sort of comical about the whole thing, right? I mean, I would say it's probably unlikely that NRTs would attract kids, even though they know there's nicotine in it. They can't really control the dosage amount, right? They're kind of set. There's no way to, I mean, unless
But Tim, we thought the same thing with Benadryl and NyQuil.
Oh, I know, but what I'm saying is it's like unless you pound like an entire box of friggin' Nicorette or something, you're probably not going to get a head rush. Whereas the kids kind of figured out, which is what we've been trying to say too, is, it's not just experimentation. It's not just, hey, what is that? Let me give it a shot, or the potential risk of them picking it up and continuing forward with it. But the kids were like, hey, let me make a YouTube video that displays me putting 6 of them inside a styrofoam cup and basically making like a huffing device so I can pull, 60 milligram Nic into my body at an accelerated rate and catch a buzz. So what I'm saying is I just find it funny, though, that, the argument is flavors, potentially, in some cases, attractive packaging, those things. But then you go and you look at the NRTs and they all kind of incorporate some of those elements to some degree. They've got orange, they got cherry, they got grape, they got all this stuff to make it appealing to an adult.
They don't have bold tobacco flavor gum, unfortunately.
Exactly. Yeah, they don't have an RY4 NRT out there. But
here's an interesting little piece of news, if I may. There's a new study out from Science Direct that is changes in dependence. They were comparing Juul to combustible cigarette smoking, and in the study, adults who switched completely or partially from cigarette smoking to Juul demonstrated lower dependence on Juul compared to their own baseline cigarette dependence. This is the culmination of several updates, but that's let's just say that's something that's, I think, very important to point out. And it's also something I've noticed as a former 2.5 pack a day smoker versus a fairly heavy vapor is when I have to go without vaping, it's something that I can do. However, I would rather have access, but it's not on a schedule like when I was smoking cigarettes. It was very much involuntary. So
there's numerous studies, Philip, that show exactly that. They all show that vaping is less addictive and using all the markers of addiction and dependence than to smoking. So and that's why it's easier for people to get off vaping, and often why it's seen as a 2-step process. You go from smoking to vaping, and it's easier to quit.
I know that's something that you've mentioned many times over the years on Twitter, that vaping is not only a way out of smoking, but it's a much easier way to completely quit, one way or the other. And I think that's something we could talk about more.
Now, when a patient comes to see a physician there in Australia and he wants to quit smoking, how does he need to be the one that pushes the vaping? Is that ever going to come out of the doctor's mouth? Ever?
Look, rarely, very rarely. So we have guidelines on this, and I'm on the committee that develops the Australian guidelines. But interestingly, when we came to the section on vaping, I wasn't allowed to vote on the decisions we made because I had views about vaping. Only the other people on the committee who are mostly anti-vaping were allowed to vote, but that's another story. But the Australian guidelines say that we should use the first-line treatments,
Yeah, that's what I'm reading.
patches and Chantix to you, and Wellbutrin. Should use all those things first. And if they don't work, after 10, 15 years, people have tried everything repeatedly and done huge amounts of damage, then we're allowed to try vaping.
Yeah.
That's what the official guidelines say. And
Is no one aware that we're on a clock here?
Sorry?
No one seems to be aware that we are actually on a clock.
Yeah,
Absolutely. So after the age of 35, smokers lose 3 months of life permanently for every year they smoke. And so, and what most experts will say is that
you got a whole page dedicated to it for physicians.
Yeah, that's for the pharmacists. What most experts, internationally would say is that people should use the treatment that works best and that will help them quit as quickly as possible. And that's not what we're doing in Australia. And most doctors would try and talk them out of vaping, actually. So, yeah, because they're not approved products, so they haven't been through medicines regulation.
Yeah.
Of course, they're not medicines, and therefore doctors are reluctant to prescribe them because they only prescribe things that have been gone through all those medical processes to prove their effectiveness and safety, which is irrelevant for vaping.
And disappointing that they don't want to take any initiative to do any studies on the relevance of vaping as a quit tool. They don't want to do any kind of focused studies on someone who chooses that to quit smoking and really get some results from that. They just kind of
Tim, we've done all that. I don't think we need any more research. I think the evidence, we've got high quality, high certainty evidence from the Cochrane review. We've got the review from the National Institute of Health Research in the UK, which found that vaping was the single most effective treatment compared to Chantix and NRT. And we've got all these population studies, observational studies. We know it works. I mean, if they're asking for more evidence, this is just a joke.
Yeah.
It's just even if it was only half as likely to kill you as cigarette smoking, it would still be a worthwhile cessation tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell me this. Do you think that Australia, considering that New Zealand is relatively close by, and their vaping policies might as well be night versus the day in Australia? What do you think? Do you think that Australia, is there a single government on the planet that Australia might turn their head to and say, well, they're supporting tobacco harm reduction, maybe we should take a second look? Or do you think they're...
No, they won't. I mean, they're all wrong. They're all wrong, by the way, all those other countries. And we'll find out one day, all the harm that's been doing. So, but look, Australia's performing a public service, to be honest. So what we're doing is we're the control arm of the experiment. So, in 10 years' time, we'll find out that, hundreds of thousands of Australians have died. And perhaps then we'll realise that, maybe what those other countries are doing was right. And maybe then we'll think, maybe we should have another look at this. So we're the dummy, the placebo arm.
But you'll take America's EVALI horseshit, but you won't take America's FDA authorized. That's just...
Well, don't start me on the FDA because they've gone really. It's gone crazy what they're doing over there.
Oh, they're not doing a very good job. At the very least, there's a tobacco flavored stick-alike from 1892 that they authorized. I mean, it's you take every little baby step you can get. So I suppose what I was asking is, America. I sometimes find myself saying, "Way to go, America!" But mostly when it comes to vaping, I worry sometimes that America is setting the wrong example for a lot of countries. So I was curious if we ever get our act together in the United States. I was wondering if that might have any effect on Australia. But as you aptly pointed out, no, they're just interested in whatever they can.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, the FDA has really made a dog's breakfast of it. They have. And there's been a lot of criticism, as you know. And I can't see them doing a turnaround in a hurry unless there's a whole sweeping out and a new generation of people coming in, and even that's unlikely.
Well, I think Brian King, whether or not he actually shows up for the event, American Vapor Manufacturers, Greg Allison, have him
Yeah.
slated for late February on a Twitter Space Q&A.
Oh, yeah.
And I hope you will submit a question for him, because it's hard to say who came up with the term Valley, but a lot of people say
Yeah.
that was him. So yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
he's running the Center for Tobacco Products here, and he's
Yeah.
deciding
Yeah.
which products get authorization. How that
Yeah.
happened, it's like I said, if you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah.
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 It's crazy.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
Polly walnuts.
Colin, do you agree with what they're proposing with plain packaging and nicotine like caps? Because personally, nicotine caps, they don't work for heavy smokers, people that have been smoking like roll your own type cigarettes or high nicotine cigarettes. And the amount of cigarettes, plain packaging with what they've done with our cigarettes here in Australia. Even now, if you actually look at one of the sticks, the name has actually been removed and there's just a number on that stick.
Yeah.
If they were to start trying to enforce a cap, which I don't understand how the hell they're going to do it, what would you propose? For me, it'd be 24 milligrams in freebase and 50 milligrams
in salt. I agree.
In salt based. But here's the scary question. What about synthetic? Because that's right in the center between freebase and salt-based nicotine. But now that the chemistry has come out and the studies on pure synthetic nicotine, it's actually way, way, way cleaner than both salt and freebase.
Yeah. I think the synthetics, when the price comes down, there's less contaminants, and although we're using, USP grade nicotine. But I mean, to answer your question about the concentration, you need to have enough nicotine to satisfy a smoker's urges. That's the most important thing. And there is the risk with smokers who smoke heavily that they won't be satisfying. But the other more important issue for me is that these compact devices, the pod devices, which are now the new big thing, and the disposables need higher concentrations. So if you go down to 20, they're just not going to work. And I think that would be a real shame, because these are the transition models that most of the people I see start with. And I tend to encourage them to move to open models later and so on, and certainly away from disposables. But I think a lot of people will only quit with those disposables and pod vapes with higher concentrations.
Yeah, I agree.
The other thing about plain packaging is, I think that's ridiculous. Plain packaging was designed to discourage people from smoking, and plain packaging for vaping sends a signal that vaping is dangerous and it's as bad as smoking. And I think that's the wrong message. I think it should be plain, and I think there should be no pictures. The flavors should be simple, but we want to encourage people to vape. We don't want to discourage them.
Yeah.
It's all about giving them an incentive, financial incentives and other incentives, health incentives to switch. And I think plain packaging will prevent that.
Do you think there's any, I mean, even if we look at it from an adult perspective and we paint a virtual picture of plain packaging saying, oh, something's bad for you, do you think that it has adverse effects too? Whereas the thing that they want to try to discourage, which is youth usage, claiming that they latch on to the colorful labels and the fancy pictures and the cool names and all that stuff. I sort of have this part of me that feels like once you turn it more into something that appears to be a taboo to a younger person, they're more inclined to be like, I got to get my hands on that, because they definitely don't want me to have it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of it. But I think the most important thing to me is the people who are going to die from smoking are the current smokers. The youth, any problems they have from those will be relatively minor, and they'll be delayed a long time. if you smoke up to the age of 35 and stop, you undo all the harm that you've done. So if you vape to 35, so what? If you vape to 60, maybe we'll see small effects. So we're not worried about the youth. We're worried about the 50-year-olds who in America and in Australia are not quitting.
Yeah.
And they're the ones who are going to get lung cancer, heart attacks. We need to change them over as quickly as possible.
And I think that's what we need to keep repeating and repeat it loudly, because we've become entirely too. I guess we are more well informed scientifically speaking than Sandglance has nothing on us. So all that being said, I think that the most important thing we can consistently say in unison is we have this many hundreds of thousands of people who are dying, and next year it's going to be the same. What about them, and why don't they matter?
Exactly. Yeah.
Because every year that
it's this whole debate about the importance for young people to avoid vaping, and yet the critical importance of older people quitting, and we're forgetting about them. We're so obsessed with the kids and their delayed and relatively minor harms from vaping, and we're forgetting about the adults who are going to die.
The absolute neglect for people who smoke, on just the disgust shown for people who smoke is it's unbearable. It really is. And it's not a subtle thing. If 420 to 480,000 a year in this country, that's a horrifying number.
It's incredible. And look, a lot of these people enjoy vaping, as you know, and they get a lot out of it. There are positive effects from smoking. So, it improves concentration. It's relaxing. It's good for boredom. It helps keep your weight down. People enjoy it. We need to help them to understand that actually you can get all of that from vaping, and you won't die, and you'll save a fortune. So I think one of the problems is that people are not informed and think, well, I enjoy my vaping, but I find people often say to me, look, I enjoy the vaping now much more than I ever did smoking. And again, that's misinformation.
Speaking of your book, how's your book doing?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Hello.
Yeah.
Start vaping. Look, the problem is that, the book's selling, and I'm
Don't look at my cart. Don't look at my cart.
Okay. I'm pleased to say that people are giving. I mean, it's only got 5-star reviews there, so thank you very much for people who've done that. But and look, basically, it gives people the evidence. The reason I wrote the book was that there is so much misinformation from every source, and I wanted people to have the actual evidence to make an informed choice. So it gives them. It responds to all the myths about nicotine. It tells them about the relative risk of smoking and vaping. And it gives them a step-by-step process of how to make the switch, what model to use, how much nicotine, how to vape, and so on. But it also addresses all the controversies like the youth vaping epidemic and why vaping's opposed and how it should be regulated.
Have you heard a story yet? Have you heard a story yet of a patient taking your book in for his doctor's appointment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have. I've had a number of patients have said that, and the doctors have said, look, I don't believe in vaping. The AMA says this, and we don't yet know the long-term effects, and we don't know what's in these products. All the usual stuff that they're being fed by the media. So, look, some doctors.
I would ask you if you had a colleague approach you yet, but that's personal.
Yeah. I've trained quite a few doctors who are open to this, particularly doctors who prescribe cannabis and addiction people. So they're a growing number, but it's really a tiny proportion of the Australian medical profession. That's the problem. I mean, the book is designed for doctors.
Yeah, I can just imagine the doctor's face, me coming in with this book in Australia. And sitting down for my appointment and just kind of throwing it down right there in front of it.
Yeah, even though the book's endorsed by Neil Benowitz and Peter Hayek and John Britton, they've all written reviews of the book, and it's in the book. I mean, it's an evidence-based book. It's got 400 references, and I would have thought the doctors would have found that reassuring. But, because the vaping in Australia it has such a negative narrative that dominates the media and the medical organisations. It's very hard to get past that.
But you didn't write this for them. You wrote this for people who smoke.
I wrote it for people who smoke. I wrote it for vapers who want to find out more about vaping. So when someone says to you, "Oh, you'll get popcorn lung from that," they can say, "Well, actually, there's a chapter here about popcorn lung, and this is what it says, and here's the evidence." But also for policymakers, because I think we just sent a copy to every member of Parliament in New South Wales, so 135 copies, and a lot to the federal members. And whenever we meet a politician, we give them a copy of the book. Now, they won't all read it. In fact, very few probably will, but at least their advisors will read it. Yeah. And hopefully it'll start that conversation and they'll see that the evidence, see the other side of the story, because they're not being, the health bureaucrats are only giving them the negative news.
True. Yeah. And I will say this, you have endorsements from all those extraordinary scientists. Jim McDonald likes your book, and that's all I need. And I'm just he's one of he's a hero, and he's also a tough critic. So I have to say that I'm just changing my Amazon password, and I'm ordering it right now, actually.
Yeah, Jim is great. And the other person that I most valued was Clive Bates, who gave me a glowing review. So that means a lot to me too. So I think the information's all there
too, right? It's on Kindle too. I see that.
It is on Kindle.
I didn't notice that.
Yeah, you can get the ebook, but I think I forgot what I was going to say, but it's available to give people the facts, and that's what I'm trying to do, just to get the information out there.
Well, it's a great book for someone that is going in for that first appointment. And if it's something that he needs to have information right there in front of him, where he's not grabbing his phone and trying to look things up and having a conversation with the doctor, it's a perfect way of doing it, because you can at least contradict with the doctor. Well, what do you think about this study? I think that's better I think a lot of times there are a majority of doctors that kind of want you to just shut up, come in, do your appointment, get the hell out. They don't want to hear about what you read on WebMD, and they don't, but there are some doctors that are like, "Oh, really? Who wrote this book?" And we'll pick it up and breeze through it, and hopefully.
Well, I also think too, I mean, don't mean to sound somewhat corny, but I mean, if you're struggling with, I think, people in your family, or and you have some people that are willing to kind of take a risk and dive into information, it's a great gift. To pick up and pass on to a family member who, when you say, hey, when you have a little time, just pick up and just read a little bit every now and again. It might answer some.
And you could save their life. The other thing I'd like to see is a copy in each vape shop, because people come in and they ask questions, and the vape shop owner says,
slide that book on over.
but I think to have one on the counter in each vape shop would mean that people could at least look up EVALI, or look up does nicotine cause cancer, or some of the nonsense that's out there.
Great idea.
That is a great idea.
All right, vape shop owners, get on that. Amazon.
Yeah, we will have that show next week. Actually, next week we'll have a few vape shops to come on. We wanted to get their side of the story, how this is affecting them, and how some of them have had to change the way they operate their vape shops. Some people will like it, some people don't. So I felt like that was something I wanted to do next week, and is have a couple vape shops come on and share their experience and how all this is affecting their livelihood. So that'll be next week.
Have you gotten much feedback?
I got like 3 shops already. Yeah, 3 shops.
Great.
So
I think that's great.
Yeah. So I think it's a good idea that just kind of we kind of always, like I said, we kind of always forget about the vape shop. We're always worried about the company, the distributor, the vendors, so hearing from the shops themselves, I think, and sharing the struggles that they're going through. I was surprised. I got a lot of DMs that said, sorry, we're closed, or they closed, or was my favorite shop, but they closed, so it's a scary thing when you start seeing close. So.
And we're hearing that in Australia, John. A lot of the vape shops are really struggling, and I spoke to the manager of a big chain today, and he said, look, we're thinking of closing our chain, because we're just not profitable. We'll very soon not be profitable. We want to save lives, but we also, the realities are that life is getting so difficult.
And they don't have the same options that some of these vape shops have here today, where they can kind of bring in the CBDs, bring in the THC products,
Yeah.
you know, and
Or even
still
the
kind,
nicotine.
yeah,
Even nicotine, they can't sell nicotine. So,
yeah. So
yeah.
you guys don't have that same option, because that's what we there's some people that dislike it, some people that, you know, I could care less. I do get a little upset when I do walk into one of these shops and I have to go all the way to the back in the far corner of the shop to find e-liquid or to find, you know, an actual vape mod, and I have to
When
Yeah.
when no one actually asks me if they can help me, and if no one, I don't care if it's me
Yeah.
or a 9-year-old kid, card every
Everyone.
person who walks in.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Yeah.
And Doctor, I'm finally your book arrives on the 7th of February, so hopefully that's in time for me to read it and pass it out to vape shops around the city, because there are a
great.
few that definitely need to read it as well.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Yeah, I think as a reference, because people, even who vape, are still listening to the media and often are uninformed, and we don't want them to go back to smoking.
Right.
We want them to be able to make an informed choice.
Yeah.
You made a good point that you wrote the book for vapors that want to learn a little bit more, and I think it's something that personally I need to take a step back and be more approachable on the subject. And I think a lot of what you write and what I've written in your blog has been, you know, very good about that. You've spoken in layman's terms about what the misconceptions are and why this is untrue and what vaping actually does to benefit smokers. And I look forward to reading your book, because I think that's something that a lot of us do, that we're just a little bit too deep into the technical details, that we're missing the larger picture, especially when we're trying to communicate how these products do save lives and, you know, dispel myths.
Yeah.
Popcorn, popcorn alone. I choke getting the words out.
Even, but as you say, even the vapors are often misinformed, and I think there is always the risk they'll go back to smoking. They'll read about popcorn lung and EVALI and nicotine causes cancer. Well, why am I taking the risk? I'll go back to smoking. At least we know what's in a cigarette. And
so you think there's a certain percentage of vapors that are?
Yeah. I hate that saying. Well, at least we know what we're getting with cigarettes. I'm like, Jesus Christ, dude.
Yeah, come on. 2 out of 3 of people, up to 2 out of 3 of you will die from smoking, and we know that. That's a good thing.
My smart-ass answer to the whole thing, we don't know what we're getting here. I'm like, well, you definitely know what you're getting with cigarettes, you jackass.
Yeah, exactly.
A fucking headstone is what you're getting.
And then it's also disappointing too, because even some of the people who are smokers who might be encouraged to try vaping, I've had smokers come up to me on infrequent cases and they'll be like, hey man, you shouldn't be, you know, consuming that, you know, it'll rot your teeth and all this other stuff. I mean, they just have all these massive misconceptions, you know, while they're, you know, while they're huffing down a cigarette. And I don't, it's those moments you choose not to be, you know, retort in a smart way, but it's like, you kind of want to say like, well, you know, even if that was true, you know, think of the alternative. I mean, at least I can get my teeth replaced. You're not going to get another pair of lungs or a heart. You know what I mean?
Lung transplants don't happen at 7-Eleven.
We're not lizards, bro. We're not lizards. That stuff doesn't regenerate when it falls
Hey,
out.
man, Daniel's doing Oprah. You never know, right?
It's coming. It's coming.
I just got in trouble for cursing. I'm 48 years old. I just got in trouble for saying jackass.
Shame on you.
Did you put money in the swear jar? Did you put some money in the swear jar?
I keep thinking
I have a garage full of swear jars.
I keep thinking they're like like every time I look over at Phillip, I keep worrying about him because I keep thinking that huge tire is going to fall on his head, and then I'm like, but it's not a tire; it's like a mirror or something on the wall. It looks like
It's
a
her
big old tire.
sister's. I can't do anything about it. It's my sister-in-law did it. It's an abomination unto the Lord. I know.
Well, I picked up on something here recently.
I like it, Phil. I like
No,
it.
it's cool. I love doing interior design stuff around the house, and it's just the shape of it with the little divots on it. It keeps looking like the side tread of a tire, and like every time I look at it, I'm like, shit, I hope that tire didn't fall on its head.
Every time I look at it, I have a stroke. So you're doing well.
What you got to do.
This is the opposite side of the house, so I don't get heard when I curse. But I said jackass, and she came.
Yeah.
Well, because she thought I called somebody a jackass, and I said,
what you got to do is you got to go to a flea market. You got to go to a flea market and find that velvet painting of Elvis and put it up on the wall and negotiate getting rid of that one behind you with the Elvis Presley velvet picture.
The velvet black light Elvis poster. Okay.
Yeah,
it's a mirror. It's perfect for very quick touch-ups before going out.
It was either that or I imagine they like to think they have a porthole to the world out there. They just kind of like look out and see the waves, cascading.
Timothy, I've looked into this. It's definitely not a porthole.
Okay, just all right. As long as there's
John Malkovich is nowhere to be found.
As long as there's no Ouija boards involved, I think you're okay.
It's a portal to a world where vaping is accepted, and Paul goes there every now and then.
Look at it in a positive light.
It looks like the captain lost, I don't know. It's heavy and it's there, and it's ostentatious as hell.
Go ahead, John. I think you were going to say.
So, what's next for you, Doctor?
We're focusing on the state governments in Australia. We don't think we're going to make any progress federally. What tends to happen with social reforms like vaping is that they start at the state level. So things like assisted dying, gay marriage, if you can turn one state, the others tend to follow. At the federal level, it's just too difficult. And so we're working with politicians and trying to educate them. And we're just about to form a vapers consumer group in Australia, which has been a long time in coming. We've just formed a retailers association. So hopefully, with all the advocacy we're doing, we will gradually be able to turn the tide. And like I said before, we definitely will win this.
Yeah.
It's just like we have with all other harm reduction campaigns, things like methadone programs, clean needle exchanges. They're all viciously opposed for a long time, and we're seeing progress in harm reduction in other areas. And cannabis reform is occurring in Australia. Pill testing is starting, and I think all these things feed into each other. So if someone's written Queensland is going to be a bug of the turn, that's one of our states. And look, I think it will happen over time. I think it will happen over time. We'll start with the easy states, and I think the others will follow.
Which state would you say is the most likely to become most likely to be an ally first?
New South Wales. New South Wales.
New South Wales.
Yeah, that's our most populous state.
Most populous. Okay.
Yeah, and I think once one state turns, we will see progress because we'll see the results, and it'll be hard to deny. I mean, we can see what's happening in New Zealand, but somehow that gets blocked off just across the road, basically. But
I just can't believe it.
And the results are astounding. And we normally do things similar to them. They have very similar rules and regulations to us, but the blinkers are on. But when
Australia's like, gosh, New Zealand would be fine. New Zealand would be wonderful. What the hell's wrong with them on their vaping policy? I swear. Everything around them could be crumbly, but they're like, well, it was all about their pro-vaping policy. It's just, I was joking about how seismic activity along the San Andreas Fault could be connected to vaping, just as easily as a gateway. That's kind of how I see Australian tobacco control. Like, well, you know what? That volcano right there, well, shouldn't have let them vape.
Yeah. Well, vaping causes climate change, and just about every other
climate change.
They're going to blame shark attacks on vaping.
That's where the green. That's where the green and Green New Deal came from. Those green disposables that everybody likes to get.
Oh man!
I have a question for the doctor. So there's a concept that we kind of discussed as far as North American legislation and maybe turning the tide and having eyes see it a little differently. So my question to you is, do you foresee any of the younger generation future politicians that are in line to eventually find their way into a legislative branch? Do you see them as being maybe a gateway to changing that attitude?
Yeah, look, there's a quote in my book about that by a Nobel laureate, and he says, look, people don't change their minds on issues, and the way often things move forward is that the older generation dies and the new generation comes through with a more open attitude and aren't married to those, traditional beliefs. So I think that's part of the solution. And I must just say at this point, my favorite new word, in case you haven't heard it, is mumpsimus.
Mumpsimus?
Mumpsimus. So mumpsimus
It's sweeping the nation.
Yeah.
Continue.
Mumpsimus refers to people who stick to traditional ideological and false values in spite of clear evidence that they're wrong.
Yeah.
So we have many of them in Australia. And I think when they die off and the new generation moves in, there'll be less of that around. So
yeah,
we don't expect to be able to convince people who are mumpsimuses or mumpsimi, but the newer generation, do seem to get it.
Yeah.
What is the
I
average
actually didn't know
age?
the word existed until Andrew Thompson put it in one of our direct message groups, and I thought to myself, "This is such a great day." I've been looking for years.
I don't know too much about Australian politicians, but are they roughly the same age gap as what we have here? Guys in their 60s, 70s?
Yeah, a bit younger, I think, in Australia, 40s, 50s, 60s, across the range, yeah. And the older people, the problem
have
in
you gotten
Australia
a Gen Z yet in office? Is there a Gen Z in office yet?
Oh, yeah. We've had people elected in their 20s.
Oh.
And generally they tend to support vaping because the younger people do. And it's the older people who just aren't quitting. I mean, the surveys show in the US and Australia that the older people over the age of 40 are just not quitting. Yeah. And that also reflects their suspicion of, new technologies. And that's why it's harder to persuade them.
Well, you think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that there's so much controversy. I mean, I can see where, let's put it this way, if I hadn't quit 12 years ago and I was just getting into this today, I would have a lot of doubt. I would be like, well, should I not? Even, you can read back and forth. You can read the positives and the negatives. You're still going to form your own opinion.
Yeah.
And if I were to just start today and say to myself, well, what's going to happen 3 months down the road? Am I still going to be able to find this product? It looks like it's not going to be around 3 months. Why should I start this? Let me try the gums again. Let me try the patches again, and kind of just waver away from the vaping because there's just so much bullshit around it. It could kind of scare off that newer, that ex-smoker into vaping.
And if all the health and medical associations and organizations that are normally trusted and respected are giving you that advice, it's very influential. And I think one of the problems we're going to have from this issue, as well as many others, is this growing loss of trust in respected organizations who are really misleading the population.
Well, the problem is YouTube. Yeah, the problem is YouTube blocks it. The problem, Instagram blocks it. The other problem, Twitter kind of leaves you alone right now. You can kind of get away with a lot on Twitter right now, but eventually they're going to, no, actually I take it back. I forgot that what's his name bought Twitter, so there's a possibility that will be kept open for a while. But you have all these social media companies, hiding it in their algorithms, not letting it show up. I mean, there's, every YouTube video now that's vape related almost has to tell their followers, hey, re-click the bell, because, people are like, hey, I'm not getting notifications of your videos. We're not getting, uncheck it, click it back on, just to go through this process, just to see the video. And It just
Yeah.
it's just all around you. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
You know?
We've tried to promote Facebook posts, but again, we're not allowed to do that. Someone's just said, have I tried complimenting Chapman? There's an interesting story there because Chapman wrote a blog. I criticised a presentation he made with evidence counteracting what he said. And he describes me as Australia's Energizer Bunny of vaping promotion in this ad, in his blog. So basically saying, this guy won't shut up. He keeps going on about vaping. So my avatar, the Energizer Bunny, I don't know if you know in the US, but it's a little bunny that's beating a drum that advertising a long-term battery, a long-lasting battery, and it just
This
keeps
is Simon
going
Chapman's
and going.
finest moment, by the way.
Yeah, so I thought that was great. So I've owned that, and that's become my avatar. I've won the award, Simon Chapman Award for the Energizer Bunny of vaping promotion. I think that's great.
I relish thinking about how much that absolutely drives him mad.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
It's
The trouble with
fantastic.
one of the problems with Simon Chapman is that he's very litigious, and you have to be very careful what you say. He can be as mean as he wants to, and I don't want to get into litigation. Who needs that? I don't want to get distracted by that. But
if he should ever bring a suit against you, please let me know, and by all means, I'll contact Carl Phillips, and we'll have a few things to counteract that. He's done awful things.
I've got a log of some of the crap he's come up with.
Yeah,
and,
I don't think there are closets. He doesn't. Yeah, there are things he doesn't want people to know about. Lots of things. So I don't think he's gonna do anything anytime soon.
I think you said, I think we should make Energizer Bunny T-shirts now.
Hell yeah.
Really screw. No, just screw with his head.
I can't believe that there aren't energy. When you changed your avatar on, I had to look hard for the story about where that came from, and I've never laughed so hard or joyous.
I had to check 4 times to make sure it was him on Twitter. I was like, no, this is not him.
Lost his goddamn mind. What happened here? Because it was such a wonderful. And then I saw that, and I thought, okay, I need to look back at the energy. Oh, it's Chapman. Oh, he's not gonna like that. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Well done.
That's why. It's for everyone's benefit. No,
he's
get a book, buy a book, get a T-shirt
in the world.
He retired. He retired a few years ago, and we all thought, great, thank God he's out of this now. Trouble is, he's been even more of a pest because he's had more time. So we're hoping. Well, won't tell you what we're hoping.
No, please. Oh, I understand. The wheel of time.
He's blocked me too, so I can't really see anything else he says. So.
I think I said something reminiscent of a compliment to him. Something like, "Sir, may I ask you? Can we have a civilized conversation?" Blocked. That was 5 years ago. Damn it.
No, they don't debate. Simon Chapman and the other anti-vaping experts won't debate us. What they like to do is they like to feed stories to the media. They like to sort of throw hand grenades in, or vaping's this, vaping's that. They'd never actually be prepared to sit down and discuss the evidence openly because they know they can't. They know they can't win. So they just get tame journalists who are willing to write just their side of the story. Yeah. And, it sounds quite convincing. He's a well-respected tobacco treatment person who's not a public health person who's done a lot of good. And he has a good reputation, but he's quite wrong on this. But unfortunately, his past work carries him through and gives him that credibility. And of course, he's got the ear of the health minister and the health organisations that he's worked with.
It says a lot about, for example, Stanton Glantz. Let's say you have Chapman and you have Glantz. As far as I know, Stanton Glantz can spout the most awful things like that you should just keep smoking e-cigs. He doesn't ever. He blocks almost never, very rarely, if ever, because he will just post something ridiculous for all the world to see and just let people go crazy in the replies. And he blocks no one. He doesn't pay any attention to it. Simon Chapman is so desperate to not have, he's so terrified about the possibility of looking like a fool that he would sooner block you than ignore you. And that speaks, let's just say that it's, or a little, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just amazing what a child he is. And I applaud you and Alex for being as jovial with him as you have been, and I just can't tell you it's amazing to me that he is.
I never blocked anybody on Twitter, but don't you have to explain why you block someone? Is it like Facebook? You just block and that's it?
Just block,
just block you.
I mean, Facebook asks you, why are you blocking this person? Is it
well, they want a reason, whatever, to give you some alternative action after blocking that person. But to be honest with you, I don't think I ever really engaged with the guy hardly at all. I think a lot of times you get blocked on Twitter by proxy. So meaning like, they just look at somebody else's follower list and then they look at your bio. And then if it says anything about pro vaping, they just automatically block you because they know at some point in the process, you're going to chime in on something that they say. So they'd rather not give you that opportunity before it comes up.
Yeah, they don't want an open dialogue. They just want to promote their approach. Yeah,
and they don't even have the good sense to save a little bit of dignity and mute. It has the same benefit. By the way, muting to hear, I've enjoyed such positive humor ever since I did that. It really has been a life changer. It really has.
Okay.
But the fact that Simon blocks anyone for so much as saying boo to him is just. It's just very indicative of what the man, who he is. It's just horrifying.
Well, just for me, the disappointing part is that I realize that when an anti-vapor makes a tweet or puts a tweet out there, there's a fair amount of I'll call it semi-aggressive backlash that they'll get on that post. I'm not saying that vapors have always been the most cordial in their response. And I'm not going to criticize that at this point. All I'm saying is that he completely disallows the ability for anyone who might be, watching his tweets. Like I don't have the general ear of the public watching my tweets. So, but he disallows the ability to have any sort of discourse in regarding the event. So someone who might be a little bit more open-minded about his comment or his article or his opinion on something, they don't even get to see an opposing argument. There's no one to stand up for the other side. It's just his one side and that's it.
Yeah. And in an echo chamber. Yeah. And that's one thing that worries me about vaping advocates, which is that they also live in an echo chamber. So I put stuff out and I think, gee, that's really powerful. But the only people who are reading it and are willing to take it in are the people who are already vaping supporters. And that's why I think we need to reach out beyond the echo chamber to reach people who are open and maybe not listening and through other avenues if possible.
Do you think he's reaching that outside with his post? Or does he have that same group that like we have with vapors in our community? We can tweet something and it's always that same group. Do you think he's getting that out there? Do you think his message is getting out further than ours?
Look, I think the problem that we have with Simon Chapman is that he has done some good things in the past. So he has credibility. Yeah. And so people will often just believe what he says because he was involved with plain packaging. He did a lot of good anti-big tobacco work. So people think, well, he's done good stuff. So maybe he must be right.
They pointed to the good old days when it was a big tobacco conspiracy. And, and of course, this is it's comparing. Let's just say comparing two things that have absolutely nothing in common.
Yeah.
So other than it looks like a cigarette. It has nicotine, and the evolution. Being worried about people dying from smoking cigarettes, to worried about people simply being dependent on an innocuous substance is just my mind constantly.
But we know what we're getting from cigarettes.
Yeah, I have a question. I have a question for the whole panel.
One day less for every 4 days you keep smoking over 35. That's what you get.
I have a question for the whole panel, and I'll push it to Colin first, and then I want everyone else's opinion on this because it still bugs me to this point. While the consultation period this time with the TGA was underway, Simon Chapman and his cronies all were having secret meetings with our health minister. Yet we can't get a sit down with the health minister. Why do you think that is?
Hello. Yeah, I mean the reason is that the powers in government have their own echo chamber. They listen to the health bureaucrats, the health bodies, the health charities, the medical associations, and they've kind of made up their minds based on what they've heard, and we're demonized, and I think they're determined just to push on with their narrative, and they're not interested in hearing the alternative.
Fair point. Next, John.
Yeah.
I dozed off.
Well, no. So I mean, I don't really know how to
I'm
put it
dealing
in.
with back pain right now.
I don't know how to put it in relative terms, other than to compare it to sort of the same sort of walls that we have here in North America, and that is that the scientific community and the anti-conglomerates, who maybe have a larger voice just due to the size of the organization, are very reluctant to have any sit downs with the vaping community, because again, I just think that they would rather be deaf to the words and realize that some actual sense might come out of that, and that people will hear, hey, I've been a vapor for 10, 11, 12 years, and I've had a significant improvement in my health, and I followed all the science and the evidence that states as such. So it's a little, it's hard to imagine why you have almost a 180 view and take on the whole thing. And I just, they don't want the general public to have anything skewer that message that they're trying to set forth. So they don't want to have those conversations, because then it would kind of kill
in this
their
country,
narrative.
if there was a way to take cigarettes completely off the shelves, we might be having a different conversation.
Yeah. Well, I think too, I think they don't want to listen to those same stories. I think they're done. I think we're done sharing our stories anymore. I really think that they're not listening to those stories any longer about, I smoked for 21 years. I vaped for 6 years. I think they're done with those. I think that but it's difficult because they don't look at our science. We can throw out all that science in their faces, but these politicians, they don't care. They don't even take the time to read those studies. To them, it means nothing. Their whole focus is some lobbyist filling their pockets and telling them exactly what to do. So to me, it just feels like the stories are done. I know everyone talks about it. Hey, share your story, share your story. They're not listening to those stories. We've seen those city council meetings where we had people get up there and share their stories, and they're playing with their cell phones, or they're looking at some piece of paper on their desk. They're done. They're done. And I think until we can get the general public, forget about the politicians, get the general public to realize that this is a product that is fucking working for millions and millions of people, this is a losing battle. I hate saying that. It's a losing
They're the
battle.
voters. I mean, the voters do, and the public, the hearts and minds of the public are really important, because that's what voters are most concerned about, the politicians about being elected. And if there's enough noise from the public, from their constituents, then they will have to listen. And there will be a critical mass where that does start to turn things.
Yeah.
And Tim, I think you touched on this earlier. I think that the advocacy community, tobacco harm reduction advocacy community, could stand to be a little less, go fuck yourself on social, pardon me.
Yeah.
And the engagement with people like Tahir, who really don't matter. He's just there to rile people up. The amount of time that, even I have wasted trying to reach that man. It's really I think probably the least productive thing we do. So I agree with you. We need to find, John, I agree with you as well. We need to find new ways of talking to people who are tired of hearing about screaming at the top of our lungs, I saved my own life. Well, they need to hear about those millions that really have,
Yeah.
haven't been forgotten, basically.
Yeah, I look at the way things are done in Florida, and I don't feel like that model is being used anywhere else. I know it's time consuming, and I understand that you need to have the people in those positions that are heavily involved, like Nick, that are going out there, sitting down with these politicians, talking to them, having the general public back them up. Makes a huge difference, because that politician knows when you come to visit him, you're not just one person there. You're thousands and thousands of people that are going to vote for you in a few years or a couple months or whatever it is. And I don't understand why that same model isn't being done elsewhere. You know, there wasn't a peep out of what was happening in California before that proposition. There was no signs up. There was nobody talking about it. Then all of a sudden it's here, you know, and it just, to me, it doesn't seem like anybody was out there pushing for a no vote. And that's where it hurts us, because, you know, we said it since the beginning. There's that group that just says to themselves, which is sad. And I get it. You know, I got my shit. I know where to get it. I know how to make it. I know where I need to go to get it. And then there's that group that nobody cares about. And that's that future smoker that's going to quit smoking and go into vaping. Nobody gives a shit about that guy. And you know, it's just, to me, that model and the results that they get in Florida just blows me away. And I don't understand why I don't see that same push. And yeah, I know you guys are all going to say it. It's money. And
Not necessarily.
well, it helps to have a little bit of money.
Oh, no. I think it's ridiculous. The California, the Prop 31, the fact that Bloomberg ended up, his total bill of goods was 65 million. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And the next largest donation was Kaiser Permanente at just 1 million. Those cheap bastards. The thing that absolutely blows my mind is that the bill that was to protect arts in education and protect women's reproductive rights, that had a total amount of I think somewhere around 15 million behind it.
Yeah.
Okay, Mike Bloomberg on his own, 65 million to ban safer alternatives to smoking. 15 million for education and women's. This is
that's it.
This is California.
Yeah.
And I think Stefan, who is, works with Reynolds, he put it very simply. Tobacco companies tried to oppose as best they could, but when it comes down to it, I believe that Mike Bloomberg knows very little about vaping at all. He just knows what Matt Myers tells him.
Yeah. But even without money, I think one of the most effective things vapers can do is to write to their elected representatives or visit them. I think there's enough emails that come in, enough requests to invitate for meetings that cost nothing, and that will send the message that there are voters out there who are concerned about it.
Yeah. And start locally. Start small. Go see your city councilman. Go see your mayor. These are the most easy access people that you're going to have an opportunity to get a personal sit down with, or the people within your own city, and learn from that. Learn how to talk to these people, because if you go in there and you start yelling and screaming and throwing out fucking statistics and stats and studies, this guy's just going to laugh you out the door, or he's going to have an assistant sit down with you. And that's worse than anything. It's just because that assistant don't give a shit. You don't give a shit. So to me, start small, see your city councilman, see your mayor, see what's going on. Just make sure that, vaping is going to be safe in your city, and not wait until it becomes a state law. And then next thing you know, you're having to drive to fucking Nevada to get I'll say it. Mango fucking vape.
What is the thing about mango that people love so much? Doctor, go ahead. I'm sorry. I have a question about a meeting that I may or may not have with the head of a large children's hospital here. I'm hoping to meet with him. My significant other, she's a practitioner, and she's made the introductions. If you had a meeting with someone who is open to the idea of promoting tobacco harm reduction. And keep in mind, this is the person who is he is a physician and the person who is the most senior physician at Children's Hospital of UAB is a part of, actually, well, it's just the Children's Hospital of Alabama. If you had that meeting, you're me, what points do you bring up?
Yeah, I've just submitted an article about youth vaping to a journal. And so some of the things that the points I make are that frequent vaping by non-smokers is actually rare. So yes, you see in the media all these reports, but the actual number of kids who've never smoked who vape regularly, and they're the ones we're concerned about, that's rare. The other thing, next point would be that vaping doesn't lead to smoking. So there's no evidence of a gateway, and we have good evidence for that now. And not only that, that vaping is actually diverting young people away from smoking. And there's no evidence that vaping is leading to regular smoking. Kids might smoke and have a cigarette, but they probably would have anyway. But there's no evidence that vaping is leading. And also the known health effects from vaping in young people are relatively minor. And I did a literature review on that. There's really very little. I mean, there's no evidence that vaping causes harm to the adolescent brain. There's evidence that kids who vape, there are associations with respiratory symptoms and asthma, but there's no evidence that vaping causes them. There's no evidence that vaping affects school performance or cognitive function. If anything, it improves it. It, of course, doesn't cause EVALI and all the other things you've probably heard about. The risk of non-smokers becoming dependent on vaping is actually very low, and there are a number of studies that have looked at that. So if you're a non-smoker and you take up vaping, your actual risk of getting nicotine dependence is very low, maybe less than 5%. And for the young smokers who take up vaping, that's actually a good thing. They're getting, they're potentially switching to a much safer alternative. And so I think overall, I think if you look at the evidence, and I'm happy to send you a copy of that paper, it's not published yet, but I'm happy to send that to you if you want to have some arguments. And it's got, got about 65 citations in it. And it shows, for example, in the UK, never smokers who vape more than once a week, only 1% of them 1% of never smokers vape more than once a week, whereas 61% of regular smokers vape more than once a week. So vaping is almost exclusively concentrated in the group that already smoke.
Yeah.
So, when you put it all together, I mean, that's quite different to the message we get from the media.
And this is I'm hoping this meeting will happen sometime before sometime in the next couple of months. And this is a person who chairs up a board of pediatricians in a very which are as far as I know the most hostile toward vaping in general for reasons that are obvious. Would you touch at all on the benefits of switching from smoking to vaping if during pregnancy, that sort of thing?
Yeah, look, I don't think there's any question that if someone can't quit smoking in pregnancy, then switching to vaping is beneficial. I mean, it's not for people who didn't smoke, but it's not risk-free, but there's growing evidence, a number of studies that the risk of harm is likely to be very small and certainly safer than smoking.
Yeah,
it's a touchy issue, but I think the evidence is now becoming quite clear.
I haven't kept up to that. I just wanted to ask you if there is, because I can look at that, but we all know that smoking during pregnancy is one of the most dangerous things you can do, period. But the overall, let's just say comparatively speaking, I wasn't aware that there was more research to that effect to support that. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
but I would, if you, I guess I can write my email in the little chat. You can see that. But I'd love to take a look at
Yeah.
that study.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that question came up a lot in the Example Box family page years ago with a couple of women that were just getting pregnant, and asking that question within the group, and a lot of guys suggested, and a couple of the ones that had gone through it suggested just going down to zero, Nick, and still having that sensation of being like
Yeah.
you're still vaping and still smoking. Made a difference for a lot of the women. So just switching down to zero and continue to vape was enough for a majority of those women to
Yeah.
get by through their pregnancy.
Right, but
But
John, I'm talking
unfortunately, women-
about Alabama. In Alabama, there are a lot of there's a lot of smokers, and there are a lot of low
yeah.
income smoke, like anywhere else. Just let's just say that the number of women who become pregnant young and unexpectedly, a lot of them do smoke cigarettes. And the truth is, there's a lot who continue to smoke, and that's something that's a problem.
That's bad. That's bad.
And I think this is something that if e-cigarettes on hand, it's something that hasn't really been at all thought of or considered.
Yeah, no, look, there's been quite a few research studies. I'm just looking at half a dozen published in 2023 about smoking in pregnancy, and the conclusions are that the risks are relatively minor and very little evidence of harm so far. I mean, theoretically, nicotine is harmful, but there's a couple of big studies that were just published. One using the PRAMS data in the US, and they found that in pregnancy, e-cig users had a similar risk of non-users of low gestational weight gain. Another study, also the PRAMS study, showing, and that's the big concern, weight gain in the young kids.
Yeah.
So there's quite a lot of research growing, and certainly in the UK, that's a clear recommendation, and in New Zealand, that if you can't quit with other methods, you should switch to vaping.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because man, that kid will be kicking all fucking night long with all that's how I look at it. I'm like, fuck, that's like
Yeah, my state is very interesting in that we have all kinds of things. We have a great, optimistic, bright future ahead of us. It's just not quite here yet. And outside of the city of Birmingham, there's a lot of people who are just barely scraping by, and it would make a lot of sense if physicians could just recommend a cig-alike instead of that, because patches, as you well know, aren't quite as effective.
Here's another study from Preventative Medicine this year by Xu Yu Lin found that although pregnant women who quit vaping before pregnancy or had any use during pregnancy showed no difference in having a high risk birth in comparison to women who did not vape.
Okay.
So, we're struggling to find any harm.
Yeah.
Right.
And just from a common sense point of view, if you're giving people a tiny fraction of the chemicals, it's got to be safer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you.
boys,
Happy to send any papers to you if you were interested in looking at that. So
yeah, you can put that in the private chat, Phillip, and he'll be able. Colin should be able to see it.
and I'll send you an email. Just send me, and I'll send you an email. Just send me your email address, and I'll forward them over to you. Yeah.
Yeah, and then. All right, guys, we are at past the 2-hour mark. I want to thank Dr. Colin and Phillip for joining us tonight. It was good having you guys both on the show. Go check out Colin's book. I put the link to Amazon in the header there, guys. Hold that book up, baby.
Yeah, there you go.
And I give that, and it's available in.
Thanks, Paul.
It's a.
Yeah, I've actually got to come and see you and have a coffee because I want the inside cover signed. By the way,
you got to get that signed. Damn it, you got to get that signed. Yeah,
I've got a nice note, and I've actually got that in a frame. But I want the inside cover signed.
Have you considered doing a book tour in Australia where would they allow you in a bookstore to sit down and sign copies of your book? That's what I should ask.
It's not sold in the bookshops. I've written to a couple of them, but because it's so controversial.
Oh, true.
They won't take it on. That's half the that's half the problem here, and that's one of the last. It's one of the questions that they had in the survey. Online promotion of vaping products, whether or not they want it banned, and now they want to start geo blocking social media, and I just
Social
laughed
media.
at them. I went, yeah, good luck with that one.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought your book was actually available in an actual bookstore in Australia, but I guess
No,
Couldn't get it done.
they won't touch it. That's the problem here.
Listen,
You know,
hey, people weren't big on Nabokov to start off with either, so give it time.
Damn.
Give it time.
that is crazy. That is
So,
crazy.
Paul, I'll take up your offer as long as you're paying for coffee.
There you go.
sure.
That's all you're going to go coffee. Your
Done.
signature,
Not a
Kyle, your
problem.
signature's worth more than a cup of coffee. I
Okay.
say
Maybe
you
we'll
can
negotiate.
Paul's eyes just went wide.
I say
Wow.
a cup of coffee,
Not
some
a-
lunch, and a couple beers, at least a couple beers.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good to me. Okay.
Well, Colin lives near the water, so we can go fishing all afternoon.
Go fishing. There you go. Go fishing.
That's easier.
Yeah.
I am in the wrong state. John, Tim, Paul, thank you so much for
Hey,
having
we
me.
always
I-
love having you, Phillip, on
truly
the
an
show.
honor. Thank you.
You know, we always love having you.
really
Everybody, we'll
appreciate
see everybody next week. We do have a special show next week. Like I said, it's going to be vape shops, small business. We're going to focus on the small business side and hear their story and see what they're going through with all this nonsense that's going on. So hope to see you guys all next week. Again, thank you, Dr. Colin and Phillip, for joining us, and we'll see everybody next Wednesday.
Sounds great.
Hey.